Hello everyone, my name is Andrew and welcome back to Frames of Space. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode. This episode, for the record, is going to be a bit more just me. I don't have a guest today. I'm just going to be monologuing for quite a bit. So strap in to hear me talk a little bit about this podcast, about its past, about its present, and about its future. And just for the record, this episode is going to sound a lot more stream of consciousness than my usual narration these days. Like typically I have a script, or at least I have some planned way to make it sound very professional. Today I'm very deliberately trying to make sure that it doesn't sound professional, because I hope that if I include the stuttering and the pauses and me just trying to figure out how to word things, it does come across as a little bit more authentic. I have a script in front of me, but I think I'm going to only follow that script some of the time, and otherwise I'm just going to improv the way that I feel and try to improv me explaining stuff about the podcast, stuff about its past, stuff about its future, and so on. With that out of the way, I just want to say up front that I really, really have enjoyed hosting this podcast. I've hosted this podcast for over a year, and almost a year and a half at this point, and it has truly been an incredible journey. I've had the privilege of speaking with so many different brilliant minds, well-known figures in politics and passionate thinkers, and they're all, or at least many of them, are shaping the way that we see the world. And these conversations have left me inspired and honestly a little bit in wonder when it comes to the curiosity and engagement of it. Just as I am a little bit in awe of the curiosity and engagement that you all bring as listeners. This probably does sound really cheesy and cringy, and don't worry, the cheese and the cringe is going to get worse as this episode goes on. But I've been incredibly fortunate to have such great listeners to this podcast. I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you. Your support, whether you've been here since the first episode or if you've just joined recently, all of that means the world to me. And you're the reason why I keep coming back to the mic, and the reason why I continue to be eager to explore new ideas and dig deeper into the issues that matter. So on to the content of today's episode. Today's episode is going to be a little bit of a mix between a bunch of different things, but primarily it's going to be me talking about how the podcast has evolved and me sharing announcements. Some of these announcements are old news that I'd like to bring to your attention again, and some of these are things that the podcast will be doing in the future. And I will be doing the classic podcaster thing of plugging my content, but don't worry, all of the content that I'll be plugging will be directly related to this podcast. I hope you stick around for all of it, but if you don't want to continue hearing my monologue, you are always free to click off this episode, and you'll hear from me again next week, and I look forward to that. But if you're still interested, strap in, because we're gonna continue to. Okay, this does sound kind of cheesy. As we walk through this journey together, I just want to say thank you again for being part of this community. I'm really excited for what's ahead, and I can't wait to keep exploring the world with you, one episode at a time. So, before I jump into the next part of today's announcement, there are just a few more things that I want to share with you all, especially those of you that have been following along, and even more so for those of you who are new. First off, I said all that stuff about how great it is for this show and how proud I am of how this podcast has been made over the past year or more. Almost a year and a half, like I said. But what really excites me right now is what's coming up next. If I may editorialize, I think that This podcast is going to have some really incredible guests lined up, and I'm really, really looking forward to publishing some of the conversations that the guests over the next few weeks will provide some really tantalizing and unique insights. And I wish I could say some more, but I think I'm just going to stick with like the vague narrator trailer voice thing. And the vague narrator trailer voice is telling you that I genuinely think you're going to love what's on the horizon. But in addition to all of that hyping up my future episodes, because I do believe that they deserve to be hyped up, especially the star power and the intellectual rigor of the guests. But to all of you who are listening, I want to take a moment to explain the meaning behind the name of this podcast, Frames of Space. I think I explained this about a year ago, back in like late October of last year, but I know that so many of you have joined since then, and I think it's worth repeating. So the idea behind the name is pretty simple, but it means a lot to me, which it has to do with the nature of political commentary that day, like these days. There's so much political commentary out there that is really accessible, but often shallow. It often just like scratches the surface of how politics works. And on the flip side, there's often political commentary that is super nuanced, but it's locked behind layers of jargon and insider baseball talk to the point where it makes it hard for most people to follow along with what's being said. What I'm trying to do with this podcast is to build something to take the incredibly nuanced aspects about politics and explain it in a way that is more accessible and more understandable. Imagine that these deep and nuanced political conversations, the reason why they're not that accessible is because there's tons and tons of negative space around where the explanations and accessibility should be. There's this gap, this empty space that I'm building intellectual scaffolding around. My podcast is trying to build that intellectual scaffolding. Think of them as essentially frames that fill the space, the void that prevents really nuanced policy wonk discussions from being more accessible. I want to take those intricate insider baseball arguments and wrap them in something sturdy, metaphorical wood or metaphorical concrete, I guess. So those are the frames of space that I'm trying to build with this podcast so that anyone who's curious can step inside and explore what these discussions are all about. Now, that probably does sound cheesy, but no less cheesy than what I said before. But I do believe it, and I want to make politics something that you can engage with, not just something that you can overhear and tune out because it feels too complicated or too much like an exclusive club. So yeah, that is at the heart of what we're doing here. And if today's episode does feel much more off the cuff than usual, then yeah, that's just where my head's at right now. But I am always excited to keep sharing, to keep building, and to keep bringing all of you along for the ride. And now time for the next part of this episode's announcements. So now for another announcement, which in a way is basically just an old announcement revisited. So you might remember a few episodes back when I had Ali Volpe from Vox on the podcast, the episode started where I mentioned an audience listenership survey. Basically, I was asking all of you for your honest thoughts about the podcast, what you love, what you think could be better, and even what you'd miss if this show suddenly disappeared. And I really loved the responses. I was really pleased by how thoughtful and insightful your feedback was. And like I said back then, I really value the relationship that I have with my audience. I want it to be a two-way relationship. I don't want this podcast to just be me talking to you like you hear today. I want it to be a conversation, a real exchange of ideas. So that audience listenership survey, I'm bringing it back. I want to hear even more from you, and just like last time, I'm offering a little incentive once again. If you fill out the survey and your answers are at least somewhat coherent, you'll get a free one-on-one video call with me. No catch, no strings attached. I would please make sure that you're a regular listener. If this is your first episode, then don't fill it out because you've never listened to any of my interviews. But if you have listened to like 5 episodes or so of the podcast, then yes, you fill out the form, I'll give you a free one-on-one video call. No catch, no strings attached. It is just a chance for us to sit down face-to-face and have a video call about whatever is on your mind. Maybe it's politics, maybe it's something you've been curious about, or maybe you just want to chat about the podcast itself. I really believe that the best podcasts are built on genuine connections between the host and the audience. So if you've got thoughts, ideas, or even just a burning question inside your head, don't hesitate. Fill out the survey and let's have a real conversation. I'm giving you a carrot and there is no stick, just the carrot of a good chat. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. Now, before we dive into the main announcement in this episode, I guess I want to share something that's kind of adjacent to the podcast itself. Sort of a behind-the-scenes update, but it's not really an update and it's not really an announcement and it's not really adjacent to the podcast itself because it is the podcast and it's not really behind the scenes because it is public as well. So this is something that I've been doing for months and months, but I guess I thought I might as well mention it in this podcast in case any of you are interested and didn't know about this before. So here's the thing. Many, many months ago, I set up a newsletter for the podcast. It is on Substack, and it has the same name as the show, so it should be easy to find. Basically, it's just the podcast, but released as a Substack newsletter with like TLDR updates and TLDR summaries of the podcast as well. The idea is pretty simple. Every time I publish a new episode, the next day, you will get a newsletter in your episode that is all about the episode. If you're subscribed, you'll see a post with the same title as the podcast episode, and it's basically a companion piece that like I mentioned, it contains the summary, but in general, it is basically just the podcast episode in the form of a newsletter. So let's say that you're busy. Maybe you miss an episode or you just don't have time to listen to the whole interview. That is where the newsletter comes in handy. You get to look at the key points from the conversation and the most interesting arguments and the moments that really stood out, both from me and any of the guests that I have on. So if you're curious about the big ideas, but you can't catch the full episode, I guess feel free to read the newsletter and stay in the loop. But I think one of the coolest things is that the comment sections are open on the Substack newsletter that I have. Not a lot of people know about this yet, but I guess if you're listening now, you do. If you have any thoughts, any feedback, or just you want to share your own perspective on something that we discussed in that episode, you can jump into the comments. I make sure to read the comments, so if you have something to say, I will hear from you, and I plan on continuing to hear from anyone who takes the time to reach out. And if you are someone who listens to the podcast on an app, but for some reason or another, you don't get notified when a new episode drops, I guess you can solve that problem by subscribing to the Substack, because you'll get an email every week the morning after an episode is out, so you're always up to date. If any of that sounds interesting, if you want the highlights, if you want to join the conversation, or if you just want to make sure you're always in the know, feel free to check out the Substack. My newsletter is in the show notes, and I'd love to see more of you over there sharing your thoughts and helping shape where this podcast goes next. All right, now that's the end of this little sort of announcement, but more just like a description of something that has already existed but I realized I never talked about it here, so I figured I might as well talk about it. But now let's get back to the main event of even more announcements. But I promise they're all in service of making this space, these frames of space. Okay, that sounds really cheesy. I promise they're all in service of making these frames of space even better for all of us who are curious about politics and the world around us. So stay tuned if you're interested. Yeah, so now I guess you've reached the meat of the episode. I have a really exciting update to share with all of you, and I think this might be the most exciting thing that I've announced in quite a while. So first, let's rewind a little bit to earlier this year, back in like April and May. There was that one stretch in April and May where instead of sticking to my usual schedule of publishing every other week, I managed to put out an episode every single week. So I was putting out twice as many episodes as I usually do. And it was a bit of an experiment at first, mostly to keep up with the fast pace of current events and because I was having a surplus of guests and all that. But it ended up being so much more than all of that. You see, when I was publishing weekly, I realized that gave me the chance to explore a much wider range of topics and perspectives, more about culture, more about politics, even a little bit about philosophy, and all of the different lenses that I really love using to make sense of the world. I got to have fantastic conversations with guests like Noah Smith, Jessica Groves, Dylan Matthews, and so many others. And that period was honestly a highlight for me. It was really rewarding to be able to share something with you every single week. So obviously, I had that run had to come to an end because publishing weekly isn't always easy. Life gets busy, and sometimes it's not possible to always keep up the pace. But when I can do it, it does help me stay ahead of the curve and feel more connected to what's happening in the world. And honestly, it makes me feel a little bit more satisfied with the work that I am putting out. So here's the big news. I'm going to begin publishing weekly again, starting now, and if I'm lucky, it'll continue through the end of the year. I can't make any ironclad promises, but I'm pretty confident I can get at least 6 consecutive weekly episodes out, just like I did back in the spring. And even if the streak doesn't last all the way to next year, I am going to try to enjoy every second of it. And I hope you will too, because the idea of doubling the number of episodes, being able to dive into twice as many of the topics and conversations, it is a pretty tantalizing opportunity. And I'm really glad that I'm going to be able to do that. And once again, best case scenario is that you'll be hearing from me every single week from now up until the end of December. But I'm definitely going to try to do it for at least 6 consecutive episodes. And either way, I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope you are too. So yeah, you've reached almost the end of the episode, but I do have one last announcement that ties into this about how you can make weekly publishing even more sustainable for me. Because there is one thing that if you have the resources, you could be able to pitch in and help me to make weekly publishing more feasible. But either way, I just want to share this update right now and let you know how excited I am to be back on a weekly schedule, at least for the next 6 weeks, preferably to the end of the year. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to share what is coming next. Yeah, so obviously, if you're still here, you heard me talk about how I'm going to go for publishing every single week for as long as I can. And I genuinely hope that I can pull it off to the very end of the year. And if anything changes, I'll make sure to let you know. But there is one thing you could do to make this whole weekly publish thing a lot more sustainable, which is a little bit of extra support. And yes, I'm sorry, but this is the part where the podcaster in me starts to plug my stuff. I have a Patreon page. If you've ever thought about supporting the show and the work that I put into bringing you these conversations, I'll drop a link to the Patreon in the show notes. No pressure at all, but if more of you join, it would really help me to keep this hot streak of consistent episodes. And there are some perks if you decide to become a Patreon member, like getting early access to info about incoming guests and all that. Like at the beginning of the episode, I was using my cheesy narrator voice to drop hints about really cool guests that I will be having on, and I didn't drop any names. But if you are a member, then maybe you will get some names of like the specific names of the guests that I'll be able to get on. And plus, I'm planning on hosting live Q&A sessions on the Patreon, so if you've got any burning questions or if you want to chat about politics, current events, or anything else, you will have a chance to do that directly with me. And if enough people join, I'll definitely add even more perks along the way. But just to be 100% clear, this is totally optional. I never want this podcast to feel like it's all about asking for money. That's not what I'm here for, and I know that's not why you're here. It's not why you listen. I just want to keep bringing all of you thoughtful, engaging conversations with fascinating guests. And if even a few of you join, that would help to make the process just a little bit easier for me. So that's my big update for today. And I really do hope that all of you stick with me for another year of exciting episodes, insightful interviews, and hopefully some quite intellectually sumptuous discussions. Thanks again for being here. Thanks again for listening and for being curious about the world. I hope you found this episode useful, both as a look back at where we've been and a glimpse into where we are headed. Take care, and I'll talk to you again next week.